Hello, 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 everyone. I am so happy to see y'all again. I took a few weeks off. Everybody needs a little time off. So I hope that you have missed your Money Mondays as much as I have missed you all. And I really think, one, this speaker is a great time of year to talk about it, but also just as we look at where things are in the economy, as we look at where things are just overall in terms of stress levels. We are in a post COVID, not post COVID world where we have learned a lot from COVID and see the world differently, probably prioritizing things differently, maybe even prioritizing family and time with family and so forth a lot differently as well. So it's a great time for us to talk about. And I posed the question just a few days ago about making sure that you're not getting burnt out from your side hustle. But sometimes it's not necessarily that you're getting burnt out from your side hustle. You actually get burnt out from your day job. And you barely have enough time for your side hustle. But as we're in this mode of uncertainty, so we don't know if somebody's going to be the next round of layoffs. We don't know what's going to happen in terms of downsizing, the ability to find a job. We know prices on just everything under the sun is higher. So this is a great time to talk about, is it the time to venture out on your own? So many great companies have started in the midst of economic downturns. As we look at kind of the history of some of the companies that we love and use or hate today, they were started in the midst of a downturn. And so we have Stefanie with us today. She is known as advisor to underestimated founders and funder ideas. She is the startup chief of staff at large, coach, serial entrepreneur, changing the face of media and tech, embracing rest as resistance. I love that. More rest. Working for the healing and liberation of Black women, herself included, international yoga and mindfulness teacher. She is the founder and executive producer of international leadership development retreats and conferences, including Reparations Retreat, GetCon as Gender Equity in Tech Conference, Think, Start, Do Women's Entrepreneurship Series, and Vision Venture Retreat. She's also an international yoga and mindfulness teacher, trained and certified in India in 2012, and founder of Wellcore Enterprise Yoga. So it's like everything. It is it is the rest, it is the relaxation, it is the taking control. And so Stefanie, tell us a little bit about your story and how you got started.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. So, I started my career as a journalist, writing about startups and entrepreneurship in the late 2000s. The thing that was really interesting at that time is we were going into the Great Recession, and I noticed this trend of folks who thought that they had a stable corporate job, like really having the rug pulled out from under them. And what I started to see was this trend of these folks kind of dipping their toe in the water of entrepreneurship and thinking about going out and starting their own businesses. It really was a moment where folks were reassessing their risk tolerance because, again, the things that they thought were certain turns out were not certain anymore. Meanwhile, they had these great skills, this expertise from their career, from their day jobs, or even just passions, things that had been kind of like a side hustle that they were passionate about, that all of a sudden they realized, hey, like I think that I can make a go of this and actually turn this into my full-time gig. So, that inspired me to go and start working for startups in the tech industry. I did that for a few years before getting super burnt out. Took some time, traveled around the world, lived in Australia, in India, Nepal, Thailand, the UK, and then came back to the US about 10 years ago and realized that it was my turn to start my own business and to really sort of take my destiny, my work destiny and financial destiny into my own hands. So I started Wellcore Enterprise Yoga. I worked with folks on site at work on yoga and mindfulness because it really was a moment in time where that was something that was becoming a lot more mainstream. And as folks were just generally caring a lot more about the well-being of their employees. So from there, I went on to found a series of conferences and retreats specifically to support women entrepreneurs, because I realized that like it can be a really lonely journey as a founder. So finding that community of other women who understood where I was going, where I had been, including folks who were like mentors who are a little ahead of where I was, but also folks who I could mentor as well, who were just getting started. Um, so really that's kind of what led me into entrepreneurship. Since then, I focused on advising other founders in the nonprofit and for-profit sector, and really just continuing to create those community experiences to be able to bring founders together, especially women of color founders, so that we can support one another and really sort of serve as that example of what's possible. Because I mean, as sort of cliche as it sounds, it's like if you can see it, you can be it. And really, at the beginning of my career, something I lacked was like founders who looked like me. So that's been a huge motivation to just like increase that visibility and make it feel more accessible for other women of color who are interested in just stepping out on their founder journey.
I think that's huge when you talk about just community as a whole. And so, in terms of trying to find women entrepreneurs, should it be focused on just entrepreneurs and founders, or should it be making sure they're women, making sure they're in your industry? What makes the most sense as people are trying to make those connections and make sure that their journey is probably smoother than the last?
That's such a great question. So, I mean, I think it really depends from person to person. Um, I I'm trying to think about my own sort of like network, and I would say that like I've really networked and built a network across industries. That's been helpful because there are a lot of things that can sort of translate, and I also would say that like when you're in a room full of founders who are doing the exact same thing as you are, like there is value in being able to like learn from one another. But I think there also can be sort of competition. I think that it's like more valuable to be in a room where you're one of a few who are doing what you're doing, because it allows you to have that like business development opportunity, and you can still be like learning from other founders in their journey. But I think that like strategically it gives you an advantage to be able to like be referred to other folks or like actually find business, which I think for me at least is an important part of how I network besides that like learning opportunity.
I think that's really big. Now, a lot of women are saying, so they're in this place, and we talked about this before we started, and you're either sitting there wondering, maybe they did the first round of layoffs, or maybe the whispers around the office about it's coming. And maybe you're in a situation and you're like, I don't know when to make the break. And we've interviewed a number of ladies here on the show, and they've talked about they were laid off and then they started this great journey, or something traumatic happened, something major happened. So, I'm sure that will happen. That'll continue to happen. But for women that are saying, I don't know, I got this good job, secure job, I had a good income, hate it, but still, I'm not quite ready, or maybe I'm afraid, or whatever that might be. What should they be doing in that respect? So how do you know when to make that break and when to walk away?
That is again like such a good question, and I think it sort of depends for each person. I think first it's really important to like consider, are there other folks who are depending on you, your family, your spouse, like other people in your household who you might be like financially responsible for? That's something that I think is going to sort of maybe have you weighing a little bit more on the side of caution. On the other hand, like when I went out on my own, I was newly married, but didn't have children, like didn't have a mortgage yet. Like I understood that I could afford to take a little bit more of a risk. So like some things that I would just encourage you to think about, like if you're thinking about this transition and the timing. So first of all, thinking about like what are your strengths and how can you like leverage your strengths in your area of expertise to really like be that subject matter expert in whatever it is that you're wanting to do. I think that like that helps it to be more sustainable and more practical versus saying like, hey, I'm going to learn this totally new thing and then I'm going to become an expert at it and then I'm going to make all kinds of money. Like maybe, like maybe that's possible, but that's probably not going to be like your quickest pathway to success. So I think it's important to like really understand what your strengths are, and what that area of expertise is so that you can leverage that sort of appropriately to have that quickest path to success. Also thinking about like ease and joy. Again, like whatever it is that you're doing, especially if you're doing this on the side in addition to your full-time job, like that means you have to have the energy and the time and the motivation to do that once you're 9 to 5 or whatever your day job looks like once that's over. So it's like if you're picking the hardest thing to do, like again, like that maybe is really outside of your core skill set or for whatever reason feels really difficult. Again, that's something that's not going to be sustainable. It's going to be hard for you to even like find the motivation to do that, let alone want to transition into doing that full time. Um, and then, I mean, like one of the kind of like last things I would say is like think about your values and like your core values and like align the work that you're doing with those values. And that helps bring in some of that ease. It helps bring in some of that joy. And it just makes it a little bit easier for you to just kind of like move forward and like when you're considering all of these different things, this isn't a great answer, but it's like you'll know. It's like once and so, it's like you'll I think have this sense of when it really is time. Like when your workload for your side hustle is starting to get so big that it's infringing on like your day job, that's a good time to think about making that transition, but also know that you don't have to wait for that. Like, if you see that opportunity and you recognize that it's there and you can see that pathway, then I think it makes sense to jump for some folks, kind of just depending. So,
Now, I think sometimes we look, and especially on social media, they'll have you thinking that like somebody quit their job and they were making three times as much as their day job just in a matter of months. What are some of the mistakes or maybe the bad expectations that people have when they're making this transition?
oh my gosh. So, I mean, one thing is like that I see a lot is folks forget that you have to tell people what you're doing, like that marketing and that promotion piece. It's like you quit your job, you like maybe make one social media post about it, and you say, like, hey, I'm doing this thing now, like, come support me. Like telling people one time is not enough. You have to like be really consistent with like spreading the word about what you're doing, really tapping into your network to let them know and doing that over and over again and to a point that it will feel like overkill. And only then are people going to actually start remembering what it is that you're doing. So really just like remembering to like tell people what you're doing, be consistent about spreading that message. But when you think about what that message is, be sure to remember like who your ideal customer is, like who your target audience is. Like you're not talking to everyone necessarily. You want to speak really specifically to like your value proposition or like another way of thinking about it is the pain points of the folks who you're trying to serve. Like what is the problem that you're solving for your target customer and like really hone in your messaging on that is something that will just have so much return on that value. And then two, just like don't try to be everything to everyone. The reality is like you're gonna tell some folks no. There are people who are gonna approach you to work together who it's not gonna be a good fit. And you have to be willing to like stay focused and don't be afraid to say no and recognize that that's going to be or that's going to play a really big role in like the sustainability, the longevity, the success of whatever it is that you're doing.
Now I know, and we were talking about this before. Sometimes when you're going out and you say, "I want to target women," and then they're like, "Well, maybe I'll include men too, just because it's a larger market," or you may target Black women, and you're like, "Oh, but I don't know, it's not enough." And so people are like, "I don't want to niche down too far." How do you pick that target and kind of stick with it? And so if you're like, "Oh, I mean, I don't want to insult anyone and say, oh, wait, I only work with women, or oh, wait, I only work with, or I am focused on a certain demographic." What do you say to that founder as they're
Yeah.
kind of thinking about who they focus on?
So a couple of things. Like number one, go back to your why and your values. So I mean, sometimes you can answer that question through like for me, like one of my strongest values is like working for the healing and liberation of Black women. So I work with Black women, I work with other women of color, and sometimes I work with non-women of color. But for the most part, like I really prioritize Black women because that is just a part of my core values and a part of like what I wish that I had when I was earlier in my career. So ask yourself about your why, think about your values. And then the other thing I would say is like think about your network, think about like the spaces that you're in, either in real life or virtually. And it's just like you can find those spaces like for those niche whatever it is, and it's like if that isn't working for you, then it's okay to change your mind, and it's okay to say like, okay, you know what, I really did give it a go, I had this really narrow niche and it didn't work for me, so I'm going to expand it to, and it, again, you don't have to expand to everyone right away. You can think about, all right, maybe women is actually the audience that I want to work with. And I just like challenge anybody who says like Black women is too narrow of a niche. Yeah, right. Like it's not. Like, I mean, so I think also it's important to like challenge yourself and think about like, is it really whatever your niche is, like, is it really too narrow? Or, you know, is that a story that I'm telling myself or that I've heard from other people that's influencing how I think about it?
No, I think because this is kind of on the road of all the things that you say in terms of why. And so some people are probably watching and they're like, I'm thinking about change. I'm thinking about I'm thinking about going out on my own, but not quite sure. So one, if there's some reasons why, or some folks who want to kind of share either, they had to out of necessity, I think that's a good one. But I think one of the things, and I've heard this so many times, the reason why people don't is they'll say, well, insurance, I need health insurance. And I loved your response there because you were kind of in that same boat of
I
thinking,
was, yeah.
what am I going to do about insurance?
Yeah, and I mean the healthcare.gov was our option, and I know that it varies from state to state, but the reality is that the process of signing up for health insurance and being able to afford it was not nearly as cumbersome or overwhelming as I thought. And so when I finally ended up going that route, I was just like pleasantly surprised and also disappointed that it took me so long, thinking that that one barrier was enough to like keep me in a toxic work environment, just like struggling, because I felt like insurance, well, it's a necessity. So yeah.
And I think that's a good thing, is just facing some of those fears. Gentle Yoga for Everyone says, I agree. It's okay to change direction. Being fluid is important. And I think that's really important in terms of like changing your focus and so forth. I think some people also may even give up too fast. So how do you
Mm.
know, I'm doing this side hustle. It isn't making me millions of dollars just yet. How do I know when to press forward or change direction?
So, in a lot of the moments where I was like unsure of what I should do or wanted to do, it was actually surrounding myself with other folks who were like familiar with my journey and like leaning into them for that encouragement. Like I will say, having that strong network around you, and they don't necessarily have to be founders. Like for me, some of them are my family members. Some of them are other like business owners, our peers, or just other folks who've like known me throughout my career. So I would say that like having that strong network around you to be able to tap into and sort of like help talk you through and like talk it through with them, it's helpful because like sometimes you really have to get out of your own head and get out of your own way. So having that external perspective is a really good way to kind of come back, stay grounded in this moment and really think about it. And the other thing is just like things are going to be hard regardless. It's like if you're passionate, like doing like work that you love, trying to like change the world, which I know a lot of us are, the reality is you're going to struggle. So it's like, do you want to be struggling with like toxicity at work, the extra emotional labor of having to like show up perfect all the time and like make all of these miracles happen to then be like disregarded and have someone else take credit for your work, you know, like that's a struggle too. So it's just like, what is worth struggling for? Is it actually this opportunity that has unlimited potential upside because you're doing it on your own and because you're able to like take charge of who you work with, what type of work you're doing, the environment that you're working in, maybe working from home, like we talked about, that flexibility and just like being able to like show up authentically as yourself. So I just would say, like, I think as a Black woman who is ambitious, who is out in the world, there's going to be struggles. So it's just like, what is the thing that you want to struggle for?
And you talk about community, which is so big. We have our community encouraging people, whatever your path is, it's going to look different for some people. Entrepreneurship is not for everyone. You might change your mind, you might go in and out, and that's perfectly fine too. But when you're building that community, it's funny you say family. I think sometimes it's like the first people that you're like, they're not. They like keep that good job and don't take any risk at all. And so when you're creating that, should it be more formalized? Should it be informal where, it's people that you maybe seldom talk to on social media? Should it be something where you're checking in monthly, quarterly, something like that? What would you recommend?
Yeah, so I have a group of women who I meet with biweekly. They were introduced to me through an online community that I'm in, and they're mostly, I'm trying to think, they're mostly entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial. A couple of them are artists, like there's like a filmmaker, there's a coach, like we come from different geographic regions and different industries, and they have definitely been an important part, especially through COVID, of like being able to connect with them online in a virtual space. I also have other folks who are more informal, who like we've served on boards together in the past, who are a really great part of my network, who are an excellent sounding board. I have my in real life friends who a handful of them are out working for themselves in different ways. So I think it's a combination of of all of the things and based on kind of your capacity and what works for you. I find that it is helpful to have that scheduled time. I have another woman entrepreneur friend who I meet with and we co-work every like Tuesday and we do it virtually. She's based in Seattle, I'm based in the Midwest. And so I think there's value to having something that's regularly scheduled because it does add more accountability, which I think is something that we could probably all benefit from, but especially when you're working for yourself, when you're just getting started, having that accountability and that schedule, that predictability can be helpful. But I also really do lean on that more informal network too, just kind of depending on what else is going on. So for me, it's been a combination of both of those things, and that's worked out well.
And then I love when we talk about like just kind of forming that circle, informal and formal. And I think as people are thinking about getting started, we've talked about, not getting started because you don't have health insurance, all these kind of things. And I know some people are like, wait a minute, I need 10 different things. I need my website set up, I need business cards, all these kind of things. And so someone today is probably not making that jump because they don't have 10 things line up and everything extra perfect. So if someone has a great idea, they're kind of doing something today, how much do they need to be worried about some of those things, websites and all the social media and all these kind of things versus just getting started?
Yeah, I mean, start small, just get started. So, I mean, I think that like maybe you start by changing your bio on your social media accounts as like the one signifier of like the transition that you're making. I would say, there are all kinds of tools that you can use to just create a landing page if you need it. It doesn't have to be a full-fledged website, but even then, you don't need that. I would say business cards are useful only if you're networking in person. In this virtual world, if you are not really networking with people and exchanging those physical cards, then I would say don't worry about it. I think the most important thing is to start. Like, I would say, like, perfectionism is a big thing that holds a lot of folks back who have a really great idea, who have that credibility, that expertise, where they could just get started. And I will also say that word of mouth and referrals are the most powerful way to get like new business and to build that trust and credibility. So why not just send an email to your network? Like that could be the first thing that you do to start, is just sending an email to even just like break it up like 5 folks a day or 10 folks a day, and just start to let them know like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Is this a service that you would be interested in? Or do you know anyone else who would be interested? And it could be as simple as that.
I think that's really because it simplifies it. People are like, "Oh my gosh, I gotta
Yeah.
gotta have a full fledged commercial," and so someone is waiting until they have a full fledged commercial. We talked about kind of even the difference between like doing all these recorded videos and so forth, and people are like, "I gotta be perfect. Let me re-record." And so that's definitely one of the many things that are just holding people back. And so, even in terms of your process, as you're working with women, kind of getting them there, should they reach out to you as they are working their 9 to 5 and thinking, maybe I'm gonna make the switch? Or maybe they've already jumped out there and they're like, I feel like a fish out of water. Which one is probably the best client for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I love working with folks at their really initial idea stage to help them create that strong foundation for a sustainable full-time gig, whatever that's going to look like for you. So I would say my favorite place is to work with folks really early on. So that means they're just thinking about their transition, because that way too, we can really think about like, what are your values? What is your big vision for your life? And reverse engineer your business offering or service or product to make sure that it fits that. On the other hand, I do work with folks who are just have already gotten started, who feel like they're not getting the results that they had wanted. And even then, we end up sort of going back to that foundational piece to really sort of like rebuild to make sure that they have a strong foundation. So the earlier the better. I love that idea stage is really my very happy place.
And that, I mean, I think especially when you talk about earlier the better, just preventing some of the mistakes and some of
Oh
the things that
yeah.
we're
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, I wish I would have known. I would have done that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it can just be such a lonely road when you're first starting out. So anything I can do, again, like I'm so motivated to just like help folks, or just to try to be what I didn't have, like ultimately 10 or 12 years ago.
And how has entrepreneurship changed in the last decade? I think that's a really good point to make because as we think 10 years ago, as we think further back, we didn't know that many people that were like, oh no, I can run a business on my laptop.
Right?
That was like some wealthy white man that like had a personal jet. You might see him in the Starbucks working, but for the most part, we might be there between one meeting, but office life was kind of more the norm. How
Yes.
has that changed and evolved in the last 10 years?
I'd say there's kind of two different things that I see. One, just the fact that it's easier than ever to work from anywhere. So I think that idea that we have to be, like you said, in the office, in order to like have our own business or to even to have the credibility. Like I remember when I was just starting my wellness business, I didn't have a physical location because I went to people at work, and that was the whole point of it. And there were some tech bros, some wealthy white business owners who were telling me, no, for credibility, you have to have a space, like you have to have a studio. And I was like, no, I don't want the overhead though. And there's no point if I'm not bringing anybody to that studio. Like, why would I have that overhead? And sure enough, it's like I paid off all my debt. I was like wildly successful. And I was so grateful that I didn't follow that advice of investing in that overhead that wasn't necessary. So I think the ability to work from anywhere is really something that's changed and evolved. And then the other thing, the opportunity with like social media and just like to be able to put yourself out there at scale as an expert is a double-edged sword. I mean, something we talked about is there are a lot of people who are out there saying they're experts on whatever. However, you can be an expert. You probably do have your area of expertise or your skill set. And so I think it's easier than ever to actually reach folks at scale using social platforms. And I think that's just a huge opportunity that doesn't cost money but does cost time, to be able to like get your name out there and make a name for yourself.
I think that's a really good point in terms of especially overhead. We start talking about all the investments and where do a lot of times when you're starting a business, you don't have, unlimited funds and you're trying to figure
Right.
out where do you spend money, where do you cut corners? And so some of those larger commitments, like you said, having a studio where people are like, yeah, you definitely need a studio. And you're like, no, 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 no. Which I always say, it's forward thinking. And then when we look back, we're like, yeah, I mean, who needs a studio? But it
Well, and now like virtually, right? I teach yoga over Zoom now, like is the only way that I teach. So, I mean, it's as virtual as ever in terms of like wellness at this point.
yeah, which is so crazy because, 5 years from now, we probably would have been like, no, like you can't do that. But sometimes it's great to be flexible enough to change and evolve. And I mean, I would prefer not to, especially as cold as it is, not to leave my house for
Right.
anything.
Right.
Not to leave until spring. And so, as we think about, okay, what next and how to make that move and how to be innovative and not be scared of kind of what could go wrong and all of those kind of things, what are some of the first steps as someone is saying, okay, I'm going to reach out to you? How do they prepare for that first conversation?
I would definitely say think about like your strengths and your passion, because those are things that I think are important. And not to say that you have to be super passionate about your business. Like there maybe is, you know, something that just is like a great opportunity that you see and that you recognize and that you want to take advantage of. And like that's great as long as that aligns with your strengths and like your values. So I would definitely say like know kind of like what you think you're bringing to the table as a business owner, and know that there's probably even so much more than what you've thought of, but really kind of familiarizing yourself with like what it is that you're bringing to the table and some kind of idea of like what you would like to do, um and kind of why. Like I think that's helpful information for me so that we can really start to kind of like dig deep and think about those things.
And I think it's great because I know some people, they'll say, all right, I'm gonna do this. Maybe they got a severance package and I'm like, listen, if I'm not making money by the time severance is over, I gotta go find another job. How long should someone give themselves to be successful or to make this work or to see some progress before they say, all right, I think I need a job?
So again, like there's no shame in working part-time while you're also like getting your business up and running. Like that's something that I've done at several different points where I like bartended on the weekend actually because it was just like, all right, I don't want to have an emotional investment in this, but I need a little bit of cash coming in, and this is a good way to like make money but not have to like do the emotional labor and song and dance of, whatever the performative office antics that are sometimes required as a Black woman. And so like the timing depends, but I know a lot of women who it's taken them a year. And I know that is not an answer that folks want to hear, and is not necessarily feasible to have a year without income. But I would really say that, like, it can take a year, at minimum. I think 6 months. Like, I've seen folks who really come out of the gate and, like, are able to succeed in 3 months. But like those are folks, when we think about these like overnight success stories, like they're not overnight. Like there was lots of groundwork that was happening and other things that were happening behind the scenes that maybe were less obvious that led to that sort of like quick success. So I want to say like give yourself a year to like get everything really like up and running, and know that there might need to be some contingency planning around, excuse me, some kind of part-time work or other kind of work, or maybe you have a savings cushion or a severance package that was like super phenomenal that you can stretch out. So I mean, I also have done a lot of helping folks figure out like how to budget and where they can cut back and other things to try to like spread that out a little bit. So I mean, know that there could be some sacrifices just kind of depending on your situation, but it's making these short-term sacrifices to be able to in the longer term really access like an upside and a potential that is so much greater than if you're working for someone else.
I think that's a really good point because we don't hear that side. It's very few business owners that say, yeah, I went and got a part time job. Yeah, I did this to continue to fulfill your mission. I mean, we're in the midst of holiday season and like every retailer is hiring some holiday folks. So it's like, oh, this might be a time to say, great, pick up some hours at some retailer. And then you can really be 100% leaned into your passion in the new year. I think it's one of those things that people are like, okay, either I have to go back to work full time. Maybe that's admitting that things didn't go right, but it might be you're readjusting while you're working this part time, and something way better is coming right after that.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, and the reality is I know plenty of other business owners who worked part-time, as they were really pursuing their business. Just make sure that it's not a part-time job that's gonna be soul-sucking. That's the other thing, is, like, you wanna make sure that, like, if you do go that route, like, you don't wanna do something that's gonna be just, like, so overwhelming or exhausting that you're still gonna feel like you don't have the motivation to do whatever it is you wanna do. So I would say just, like, be strategic and be honest with yourself about what that looks like, and know that like maybe that's not going to be bartending. Because like for me now it would not be, because that would be soul sucking, and I like at this stage I definitely wouldn't want to do that. However, like I would be open again if needed, if I was transitioning to doing something part-time, if that was like what allowed me to transition into a next sort of like era of entrepreneurship or offering. So,
And it's so many things out there. I mean, so many ways. I don't know. I can't stay up late enough to be someone's, bartender unless I'm doing happy hour. But it's one of those things that it doesn't have to look like what we see probably more so on social media. We see every business is a success. We don't see, people who are like, oh my God, I'm up to my eyeballs in debt, or I'm working two jobs, or they are working a part time job and they just aren't sharing that part.
Right.
And they're making it seem as if everything just kind of went smoothly and they worked really hard. The whole I grind and poof, then all of a sudden I was rich and you see them on vacation or something. I think it's great to know. And that might go back to even like the circle of people sharing their struggle and sharing what they're going
Mm,
through and saying, okay, how is this? Is this something I can sustain? Is someone going through the same thing? Is this a patch that someone else can say, I was there, you can push through. This isn't the end of the world. Yes, you didn't make a sale in this month or whatever that might be. Just to really kind of help you. And I know you talked about even like your formalized group. Well, you want to share the name and kind of some of the things you do with them too?
yeah, sure. So, Own Trail is the name of the community that I'm a part of. And it was a program that was called Trail Guides that doesn't exist anymore. But with Own Trail, it really is just like a great opportunity to connect. Initially, it started as a platform for women. They've expanded, and there also are men who are on the platform now as well. But like it's just a really great community that focuses on showing that like none of our paths are the same. So you're able to like share different milestones on, it's called a trail. And actually, I have a code that I can share with everyone after this. I thought that I would only have one 6-month membership to give away, but I actually have a handful.
Oh, wow.
So I can share a code with everyone. I'll share that with you after this, Rosalind, and we can share in the Facebook group, I think. And yeah, so like it's a platform that helps you chart your milestones in a really sort of like untraditional way, like recognizing that we're more than just our careers, we're more than like our financial milestones. And yeah, so Own Trail is definitely has been a huge part in helping me to just connect with other folks who want to be authentic, because that's, I would say, like the biggest thing that I see as a difference between Own Trail and some of the other communities I've been a part of in the past is just encouraging that authenticity and that honesty, because that's how we're really going to find that sense of belonging and that deeper sense of connection.
And I love that because it's so easy to get wrapped up into, why isn't things taking off for me? Or why am I not making as much as, I thought I was going to quit my $40,000 job and make $100,000. Why are these things not happening? Or I think one big thing is you make a mistake and you're like, I should have known that. I should have known I was supposed to pay quarterly taxes, or I should have known I was supposed to keep track of this or that. And it's like, no, like there's so much that you don't know. And there's a number of mistakes that you'll make. Some mistakes are going to be, a hit to your ego. Some of them might be a hit to your pockets, but there's mistakes that you'll make out there. And sometimes you're so embarrassed that you're like, I don't want to tell nobody. And someone might be able to help you. Someone might be able to say, well, actually, all you got to do is this, this, and this.
Right.
But you're like, I don't want anybody to know. Like, how could I be so silly to not know this? So I think sometimes that just having that community, I love what you said about the co-working,
Mm,
because it's one of those things that as you think about it, you're like, okay, I'm supposed to be studying, writing, putting up my social media, whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing for your business. But you clock out and you're like, I'm tired. Maybe I'm gonna lay on the sofa for a little while. But if you have that standing appointment with your accountability buddy and you're like, no, I co-work on, Wednesday nights or, Thursday mornings or whatever that is, you got somebody that's waiting on you. It's almost like the gym buddy and you're like, oh, I guess I gotta go.
yeah, definitely. I mean, the again, the accountability, especially when you're just starting out on your own, is just a really important piece that can help you stay on track. So finding those folks who can help you be accountable. And I mean, in a way that's empathetic, right? Because I think that's the other important thing is like, you don't want your accountability person to actually be like a frenemy. You want to make sure that it's somebody who genuinely supports you and who you genuinely support as well. Just like remembering that reciprocity is a huge part, at least for me, and what I'm looking for in those like accountability partners or folks to co-work with, or just that sounding board is, you don't want to just be taking all the time. You want to make sure that you're also giving. And so maybe that just is being honest about your mistakes and really, or even just like being honest when like, hey, I don't feel like doing this right now. Because I think that, like, again, social media, we have this idea that everything is like perfect and
Mhm.
amazing and so great all the time. And we're just all workaholics and we love to hustle. And that's why I believe in rest as resistance. Because it's just like you have to have that balance. You have to have that those periods of rest, and it's totally normal sometimes to feel like burnt out and like you don't want to do anything. So the more that we normalize just like being honest about that, I think the more realistic folks' expectations can be about what the journey really is like, instead of that like Instagram version.
And I think that's a good part. The rest is resistance. I'm reading a book right now. It's How to Do Nothing.
Ooh,
And it's so funny because just the thought of doing nothing and the resistance of it, and it is an action to do nothing. And just thinking about that, but also how much do we have to plan? And especially, we talked about being burnout, and sometimes it's you're burnout, but you don't know which one. And so you give up your side hustle thinking that that's what's burning you out, but really it's your 9 to 5. It's that microaggression that you're dealing with kind of day in and day out. And if you could put 100% of your energy and your thoughts and creativity on the other side, your energy can come back.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's where I think that like getting honest with yourself about like your work environment and about what you're facing there is really important, and that maybe becomes the deciding factor in helping you decide that it is time to transition and try to make that side hustle your full-time hustle. um it's tricky though. Like burnout is a hard thing to deal with, and I think that we're conditioned to just try to like push through, like we're just
Oh my
conditioned to
God,
like
I wish we would have
hustle.
never done.
Yeah. So I think that like um even just being able to take a pause and step totally back, uh and for me, I was able to take a sabbatical. It was awesome. It was transformative. But that is, I recognize, not something that everyone can do. So even starting small with like reading a book, like How to Do Nothing, and thinking about like how can you create moments or maybe a weekend of just like creating that space to be able to really evaluate and also rest, though, because like resting and evaluating, not the same thing. So I'm going to walk that back. I'm going to say take some space to just be and exist and notice like what comes up from that space, and that might help you sort of navigate deciding like if this is the time to walk away from that full-time gig to make that side hustle your full-time hustle.
I like it. It's just simply turning off the noise.
Yeah,
It's
yes,
hard to
yes,
do. Like the computer's dinging, the phone is going off. You probably got your watch, and your watch is like popping up reminders to, do everything under the sun. And it's very few times that we can just be and exist
yes,
without all the things pulling at us. And I think
yes,
that'll help connect with where you should be. And maybe I know some people have picked side hustles or businesses just simply based on the fact that they think it's going to make them a lot of money. We talked about, people were like, I'm flipping houses, and now I'm doing short term rentals, and now I'm, doing this kind of investing and whatever. And they're doing it from a place of, I just want to make a lot of money but not necessarily something that they actually enjoy. And so that might be one of the things that you're sitting and thinking is this actually something I want to do? Or is it something that I need to have enough strength to say it's time to walk away, and walking away even from the side hustle to say, this isn't it either.
Right. Yeah. I mean, back to just like not being afraid to not hold on to what isn't working for you. Just like let it go. Like if there is something that is not working for you, um, whether that's your side hustle, I mean, and I also just want to say like maybe there is a moment for pursuing something just because you think it's going to make you money. I would argue that isn't a sustainable long-term choice. So, like, maybe there is a world in which you have some kind of set financial goal and you have this thing that you're doing just for the money, and like that's okay, like, no shade. However, it is likely not going to be your long-term sustainable thing if that is your only motivation. And I would also say, just like if you are going to do something just for the cash, like at least try to make sure that either aligns with your strengths or your values. Like something that like you can anchor into to be able to increase the chances that you're going to succeed is what I would say.
Yeah, but don't chase the quick money.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't gamble.
it rarely like it just like that rarely I'm trying to think of like, do I have any really good examples of when I've seen that work and go right? And more so, I feel like, yeah, I don't. So I don't at this moment. I cannot immediately think of any.
But I think, like you said, is, sitting down to say, what do I enjoy? What do I love? What are my strengths? How can I put all those things together? And it's not, I hate the whole, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. It's like, no, there's still work. There's still,
Yeah, absolutely. That I mean, that's right. You're just like increasing the chances that you'll succeed and like, hopefully bringing some ease and joy into it.
yeah. 'Cause even if you love to cook, you might not like to do dishes. So every part of it is not going to be, the best part about your day in and your day out. But it's really being able to pivot into a place where take the risk. I will say that goodness, COVID has really put that point of tomorrow isn't promised, and how much time do we have, and how much do you give, and we've seen that a number of employers are like, yeah, that was fun, but no, we don't need you. Yeah, you got the employee of the month trophy last month, but we no longer need those employees. So it's important to just own your future and own what's next and not be sitting and living in fear. We always talk about just financial independence, being at a point where you can kind of be guided by what's important to you and not just the money.
Right.
And so that's always the goal here. And so that's definitely why Stephanie's here, to make sure that we can make that bridge that you can say, I'm not guided by just money or just health insurance or, whatever it is that's making you stay in that chair. And you can really kind of live on whatever it is that your goal is, whatever it is that your mission is, where you're trying to go, and what's important to you. So I think that's a really big place to be. And so I'm so happy that you were able to join us today. Definitely let us know if you have any questions for Stefanie. And as we're looking to see if there's any questions, let us know your final comments and, of course, how people can work with you and reach out to you as well.
Yeah, so I work individually with folks right now. I'm offering your next 90 days. So it's just basically like a strategic partnership where we sit down for 2 hours and really work through your values, your vision, and create a 90-day plan to help you get closer to where you want to be. So folks can find me. I am at stefaniemonge.com. It's just my first and last name, Stephanie with an F. And folks can reach out via my website and we can explore if working together is something that you'd be interested in. I also occasionally host retreats, sometimes specifically for women of color, sometimes they are not identity specific. So I have some reparations retreats that are in the works for 2023. Definitely check that out on my website. And then final comments. I just want to say, like, one thing as I was thinking about the idea of like overhead and getting started and how to kind of bring ease into it. And also just like one mistake that I see folks making is just like when you are thinking about like outsourcing or paying other folks to like help you as you're getting started, just be really careful not to outsource your strengths. Like that is a mistake that I've seen folks making. Is like when you're thinking about like outsourcing, find things to outsource that are your areas of opportunity, not the things that you are strongest at, not the things that are going to be sort of like your secret sauce or that thing that you know is like really your magic. So just be aware of that piece. Like that is something I've seen folks do to just like their own detriment because they think that they can get like they're faster. But just yeah, hold on to whatever it is that you are is your secret sauce.
I love that. That's great information. And some of us don't know our secret sauce.
Right.
So that's part of the conversation that you'll be able to have with them too. I know if you're working in corporate America and you find yourself good at everything, sometimes that's hard. You're the one that people come to for everything. Yes, you might be great at everything, but there are some things that you're better at than others. And that's part of what we want to make sure that you know, and that kind of secret sauce that you talked about. So I think that's a really good place to be. Now, Stephanie talked about the own trail. I want to make sure if you are not one in the group or subscribed to get our newsletter, make sure you are, because that will be how you actually get the code so you can get your own, what you say, 6 months?
6 months. Yeah, 6 months membership.
Which is big because when you talk about community, having the right community for 6 months can take your business from zero to profitable to I don't need a 9 to 5 anymore. And you'll have the freedom that so many of us are like, I don't want to come back to work. I don't want to work 1 day in the office, 2 days in the office, whatever it is. You'll have that freedom and you'll be able to really, once again, live life on your own terms. So, once again, make sure that you are subscribed to the newsletter and that you are in the group so that you'll get that. That'll go out tomorrow. Yeah, I'll get that out tomorrow. So I look forward to next Monday. We had a great speaker next Monday too. But I want to say thank you so much, Stephanie. Somebody is sitting here worried, stressed, concerned about what the next few months will hold for you. Either mergers, acquisitions, layoffs, recession. We know everything is expensive, like everything. Oh, I think this is a really good question. God bless says, how do you handle networking if you're an introvert?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So I would say for some of the folks that I work with who are introverted, focusing on online networking is something that has been like a lower sort of barrier to entry. And that's really what I would say. I would say focus on online communities as a way to sort of like get some practice, build up that like muscle, and then as you feel more confident, think about maybe in-person networking as something once you feel like you have the hang of it a little bit more.
I think that's a really good point. One, you talked about like sending stuff out to your network. So you might just be sending messages on like a LinkedIn or emails. And like you said, you were starting at like 5 a day. And so that message, it's not a call, not a big old, happy hour, whatever that is. And then starting that way and kind of working your way up. But there's a bunch of people who are definitely introverts and they do mostly everything, like when you said you got a lot of stuff word of mouth. So you don't have to do the same things. You don't have to use that same way. And just starting with where you are, just sharing your product, just sharing what your skills are, even with just a few people, and letting it grow from there? So I think that's a really good question, because I definitely feel like I'm more introverted post COVID than I probably have ever been.
Me too. I feel that. Like, I definitely feel that.
Quit asking me to leave the house. This is a good one. It says join a Toastmasters group. It's awesome
Mm,
for introverts to adapt to public speaking and networking. I did Toastmasters a number of years ago too, so I think that's a great recommendation of, once again, those communities to, bring your skills and bring like-minded people together to have that overall, what next and how to be stronger and better, kind of wherever you're going. But I think being an introvert, don't overwhelm yourself. Like, you don't have to go to all the events. You don't have to go to all the luncheons and galas and black tie events and all those kind of things. Like, people are successful right in their living room, and you can be that too. So I think that was a really good recommendation, and a really good question overall. Because, like, we're sitting here like, do you want to go outside? I don't want to go outside until it's spring. I'm in the house until it's spring. So I 100% just agree with folks who are like, I don't want to network right now. So I'm 100% in agreement of, there are other ways and means, and business and life has changed, that you can do a lot more and making those connections on social media. I mean, there's people that I talk to so often and I've never seen them in person. So I definitely think that that's possible. So I want to thank you again, Stefanie.
thank
I want to thank
you.
everyone for being with us tonight. This was another great discussion. And if you're on the cusp of, like, is it time? Maybe it is. Have the conversation. See if it's time. See if you feel good. Maybe some of the things you're worried about and scared about, not even something you should be thinking about. And so have the conversation. Use the tools, use the resources that are there for you, so you can figure out what's next on your path. So as we walk through 2023, you're going to say, this is way better than 2022. So I can't wait to celebrate. And as usual, as you have successes, share them with me. I want to share them and celebrate with you too. So I can't wait to hear what's next for you and celebrate you on your journey. I want to thank you again, Stefanie, and thank you all, and have a wonderful Money Monday.
Thank you.